I was just looking through Frank Capra's book, which film buffs are snapping up wherever they can get it. It's called The Name Above the Title, and it's just full of wonderful stuff. Your first meeting with Harry Cohn, where you decided to get tough with him, was the best way to handle him, is a classic. Could any of you make a film without being completely in control of it? We all know how Orson Welles feels about that, or don't we?
Well, of course, Orson was, a lot of Orson's pictures have been recut. And I know you had Blake Edwards on the air talking about that, about recutting and so on. And I imagine everybody here, I haven't had that awful thing happen, but I imagine you've had some experience with people fooling around with your pictures.
No.
You haven't?
I caught him,
great.
I'd shoot him.
Great. But yeah. Orson did a picture called Magnificent Ambersons, which was totally recut by a kind of group method, you know, like what you were alluding to, I think, at another studio, and what Edwards was talking about. And it was all because of two disastrous previews that they had. And this picture, it was not the kind of picture that was, you know, it wasn't an average sort of movie. And they had two average sort of previews in Pomona and Pasadena, and they were played with a Dorothy Lamour movie, and the audience just hated it. And so it was totally recut and jumbled and botched, and of course it's still a great picture. But I think a great story in connection with what we're talking about one man running a studio is with Zanuck had a similar thing happen when they previewed, I think it was The Grapes of Wrath, and it had a terrible preview. And, you know, hissing and bad cards and everything. And they all got back to the studio and they said, Darryl, what are we going to do? You know, it's just... And he thought for a minute and he said, we're going to ship the picture. I think it's good. And that was it, you know. Now that's one man making a decision.
He could see a good picture.
He just thought it was a good picture and the hell with it, you know.
Yeah.
I think those previews, we got kind of wiped out on Brewster McCloud because...
Will you watch the boom shadows on Mr. Altman, please?
But...
on Brewster McCloud?
Yeah, we preview?
No, we took it to Denver, and we had a great preview. We had much better preview than we did for MASH. And only at the end of the picture, nobody walked out of the theater laughing because it wasn't a very funny ending. I thought it was fantastic. And all these guys from MGM were disappointed. And it took me about 6 weeks later to realize that they didn't even watch the film. They saw the people coming out, they weren't laughing. I was the guy that did MASH, it's supposed to be funny, the picture can't be any good. Ship it, and they shipped it. But they didn't. I've never had anybody.
Well,
oh, no.
Yeah. Did anyone ever try to take a film from you, Mr. Capra?
I always know where the key
No,
is.
nobody ever tried to take a film from me and cut it. No, I just would allow it.
You just laid that down from the beginning.
Yes.
Well, this is
That's
very rare.
all.
I think that
And
all
I
of
think
us
if you don't
do.
lay it down,
Yeah.
then I think it's up to you, younger fellas right now. If Hollywood is dying, it's because you haven't got control of your own films yet. And you have to find a way to get control of your films away from those who consider film as some leisure time investment and just an art in a conglomerate of some kind. Yeah. And it's got to come back into the hands of the creative people. And until it does, you're going to have these mishmash. You're going to have people who don't give a damn whether Hollywood makes it or not. You see. Of course, I got a story about a preview, a bad preview. If you want to hear one, I mean.
Would you tell it? Let's take a break. We'll take a break so we have time for it, and then we'll come right back. Good. Stay with us. Mr. Capra, you were going to tell us about something happened to you at preview.
Yes, I had a very disastrous preview at the time of one of my most important films, and that picture was Lost Horizon. Yeah. We ran that picture in the projection room the first time we put it together, and invited all the people from the studio, all the Landsman and everything else. We were piled 3 deep in that projection room, and we ran it, and it was 3.5 hours, the picture. And we thought, this has got to be the world's greatest picture. Everybody just was completely way up on cloud 9. Yeah. So Harry Cohn sent for his New York executives and said, come on out, you so-and-sos, I've got something great. But he was just smart enough, this was Cohn, he was just smart enough that we probably should once try it in the theater before we really blew our tops about it.
With a real audience. Yeah.
So he said, let's take it out for a sneak preview. So we took it to Santa Barbara. He says, if we can knock off those Santa Barbara snobs, we got it made. You see, so we go up to Santa Barbara, he and his wife, and my wife and I, and that's all. Raining, and we put the picture in major preview, nobody knew what was coming up, but the picture started. And it had gone about 5 minutes, and the audience begins to laugh. Well, they shouldn't. There were no laughs. Then they began to laugh a little bit more, and finally they're laughing at everything that's happening on the screen. Well, I've died. I get up out of the chair, go on out in the lobby for a drink of water, completely nonplussed. I didn't know what. I was in a state of shock. I leaned down to get a drink of water, and another man comes out, and this is then drinking this water. He says, "Did you ever see such a doggone thing with that Fu Manchu thing they're showing?" And I just rushed out of the theater. And there was a big clock outside this theater, big four-sided clock, and just 10 minutes there, and the picture had 3 hours and a quarter to go yet. And I walked up and down in this rain. And I went into a drugstore to get a Coke. And my hair was wild, my eye was wild. And I'd get a Coke, and I'd come back into the band. Man began to worry, I looked like a drug fiend, something, Yeah. So I was waiting for this to come out. Well, 3 hours walking up and down that rain, and then they started coming out. And as you start coming out, you can hear them talking. "Oh, what a terrible thing. Did you ever see anything like that in my life? They should be shot, whoever made that picture." I could hear these. I ran to the car.
This is Lost Horizon now?
Lost Horizon.
Yeah.
And my wife and I and Harry Cohn and his wife, and we get in the car, we drive home, and everything is very, very dead, of course. Yeah. And this was Harry Cohn. This is what he was. He said the right thing at the right time. He said to me, "Frank, I still give you that 7-year contract." Well, nothing you couldn't beat that for a little, enthusiastic
encouragement.
It's encouragement. Yeah. So I went off to the hills. I went off to the Big Bear, and I started walking around the hills trying to figure out what had happened to our beautiful, beautiful Lost Horizon, but they laughed at it. And after 2 days up there walking around by myself, I came back to the studio and said, "Harry, let's preview the picture again tonight." "Well, no change." Yes, I've made one change. I've put the main title on the beginning of the third reel. And let's preview it again. That's the only thing I could think about.
I mean, there was no printing at all at the beginning?
No, I just put the main title.
Yeah.
At the beginning of the third reel. I took the first two reels out.
Oh, I see, and started the movie farther in.
That's the only
I see.
change.
Yeah.
And he said, "But we can't afford." I said, "This is it. If it doesn't go this way, I don't know what. We just got a complete bomb, that's all." And so we took it down to Wilmington, and it goes on the screen, and there is the picture that finally went out. Totally different picture. They didn't laugh. They didn't do anything. They were completely enthralled. It was a different show entirely.
But do you still know why? How do you explain that?
Well, of course, we came back, on cloud 9. Now we're really on cloud 9. We came back, and I went right back to the cutting room and took those two reels right in my hot little hands. They went down the incinerator, and they were nitrate filled, and I threw them right into the incinerator and went woof. And Hollywood, it lit up the Hollywood night sky all over the place.
That much nitrate would blow Columbia off the map.
Well, it really blew, but it did.
So there's no record of those. Now, wouldn't you sort of wish now you had them to see what was so...
I can't remember what was in them.
You were that glad to get rid of them.
Yes.
I wonder how you knew why those were the things that were wrong.
I don't know. These are decisions you make. That's
Something
all.
just told you. How did you know not to take out reels 2 and 3 instead of 1 and 2?
I don't know what would have happened if I'd have taken it. The picture would probably been better.
That's a great story.
It's a story about instinct. Yeah, that's
So
really good.
whenever you got a picture that isn't going, burn the first 2 reels.
Remember that.
You just solved a problem for me.
See, you learned something. We'll be right back after this message.